Title: The Whispering Shadows of Blackwood Manor. Prologue: The Invitation. The letter arrived on a cold, rainy evening. The envelope was old, its edges frayed, and the wax seal bore the emblem of a raven with its wings spread wide. Inside was an invitation, a request, really to visit Blackwood Manor, a secluded estate deep within the forests of Eastern Europe. The sender was a distant relative I had never met, a woman named Eliza Blackwood. She claimed to have uncovered a family secret so dark, so horrifying, that she could not bear to face it alone. Her words carried a sense of desperation, as if she was racing against time itself. Curiosity got the better of me. 3 days later, I found myself standing at the gates of Blackwood Manor, unaware that I was stepping into a nightmare. Chapter 1. The Arrival. The manor loomed before me, its Gothic spires piercing the gray sky. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Vines snaked up the stone walls, and broken shutters hung precariously from their hinges. As I approached the heavy oak door, it creaked open on its own, revealing a dimly lit foyer. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow my every move, their expressions frozen in perpetual disapproval. Eliza greeted me with a frail smile. She was a woman in her late 50s, her once vibrant beauty now faded, replaced by a haunted look in her hollow, sunken eyes. Dark circles marred her pale face, and her hands trembled slightly as she reached out. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, brittle like old parchment. "I wouldn't have asked if it weren't urgent." She led me to the sitting room, where a fire crackled in the hearth. The warmth did little to dispel the chill that had settled in my bones. As we sat, Eliza began to tell me about the history of Blackwood Manor, a history steeped in tragedy, madness, and death. Her voice wavered, and her eyes darted nervously to the dark corners of the room, as if expecting the shadows to answer. Chapter 2. The Legend of the Whispering Shadows. According to Eliza, the manor had been built in the 17th century by our ancestor, Victor Blackwood. He was a man of great wealth and even greater ambition, but his success came at a terrible cost. Victor was rumored to have made a pact with a dark entity, offering his soul in exchange for power and immortality. The entity, known only as the Whispering Shadows, granted his wish but at a price. Every generation, the shadows would return to claim a member of the Blackwood family. The chosen one would hear whispers in the dead of night, faint at first, but growing louder and more insistent until they were driven to madness. No one who heard the whispers survived. Eliza's voice trembled as she spoke. "I've started hearing them," she confessed, her fingers tightening around the armrest. "At first I thought it was my imagination, but now I can't ignore them anymore. They're calling my name." Her words left an echo in the room, as if the shadows themselves had been listening. Chapter 3. The First Night. That night, I lay in the guest room, unable to sleep. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and making the shadows dance on the walls. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard a faint whisper, so soft it could have been the wind, but it wasn't the wind. It was a voice, cold and lifeless, murmuring words I couldn't quite understand. I sat up, my heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. They seemed to be coming from the corner of the room, where the shadows were darkest. I reached for the lamp on the bedside table, but it flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. The whispers turned into a chorus of voices, overlapping and chaotic. They were calling my name. I felt a presence in the room, something cold and malevolent. I could feel its breath on my neck, its fingers brushing against my skin with a chill that seeped into my bones. My chest tightened with fear, my breath ragged and shallow. I screamed, and just as suddenly as it had begun, the whispers stopped. Chapter 4. The Hidden Room. The next morning, I told Eliza about what had happened. She nodded grimly. "The shadows are growing stronger," she said. "We need to find a way to stop them before it's too late." She led me to the library, where we spent hours poring over old books and journals. Among the dusty tomes, we found a diary written by Victor Blackwood himself. In it, he described the ritual he had used to summon the shadow sand, the ritual to banish them. According to the diary, the key to breaking the curse lay in a hidden room deep within the manor. The room could only be accessed by solving a series of riddles, each one more cryptic than the last. Eliza and I spent the rest of the day deciphering the clues, our desperation growing with each passing hour. Each riddle felt like a twisted reflection of Victor's madness, and the deeper we delved, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Chapter 5. The Descent into Madness. As night fell, we finally unlocked the door to the hidden room. It was a small, windowless chamber, its walls covered in strange symbols and sigils, etched with what looked disturbingly like dried blood. A faint metallic scent lingered in the air, mingling with the musty odor of decay. In the center of the room stood an altar, upon which rested a blackened, ancient book bound in cracked leather, its pages brittle with age. The moment we entered, the whispers returned, louder and more menacing than before. Eliza clutched her head, her eyes wide with terror, her face contorted in agony. "They're here," she whispered through clenched teeth. "They're coming for me." I opened the book and began to read the incantation written on its pages. The air grew colder, the shadows darker, shifting and writhing like living things. The whispers turned into screams, deafening and inhuman, echoing off the stone walls with a force that rattled my very soul. Eliza collapsed to the floor, her body convulsing as the shadows closed in around her, tendrils of darkness wrapping around her like serpents. I continued to chant, my voice shaking but determined. The room seemed to spin, the walls closing in on me. Just as I felt I could take no more, there was a blinding flash of light, and the whispers ceased. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. Eliza lay motionless on the floor, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. I knelt beside her, my heart breaking as I realized she was gone. The shadows had taken her, just as they had taken so many before her. But the curse was broken. The diary had warned that banishing the shadows would require a sacrifice, and Eliza had paid the ultimate price. As I left the hidden room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief and guilt. The manor seemed quieter, almost peaceful, but the silence felt hollow, like a breath held too long. Epilogue. The Whispering Shadows. I left Blackwood Manor the next morning, never to return. But even now, years later, I sometimes hear faint whispers in the dead of night. They are soft, almost imperceptible, but they are there. And I know that the shadows are never truly gone. They are simply waiting, biding their time, until they can claim their next victim. Sometimes, in the stillness before sleep takes me, I swear I hear Eliza's voice, faint and distant, whispering my name.